Hi everyone, we're here again at Homestead Senior Care on Perry Highway, and we're going to do a program today that I think you will find very, very interesting. It's called Pets and the Older Adults. And we're very, very fortunate to have Abbey Bailey with me, who has a degree in gerontology, a master's in gerontology.
I do.
So she's going to be the one in charge, and I'm just going to follow her and follow her lead, and we're going to try and give you as much information as we can for you, if you're the older person that wants to think about getting a pet. If you have grandparents that you think should have a pet, or if you have parents that are living in a facility or still in their home or whatever, we'll talk about all those different areas. If you end up at some point having questions about this and the effect of pets on older people and adults, then you can always call Abbey over here at Homestead Senior Care. So it's you. You're all set.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sue, for having me today. Again, I'm the gerontologist and client care coordinator here at Homestead. I have a master's in aging and health policy from Georgetown University, and I'm certified in Alzheimer's disease and dementia care training. So today we're going to kind of walk you through pets and older adults, the pros, the cons, and everything in between. And we have expert Sue here to fill in the gaps.
With the dogs.
With the dogs.
As usual.
So again, as we know, pets can hold really wonderful memories for people, especially older adults within childhood and as they grow and up across the life course. So during a survey, about 70% of older adults said that pet ownership is actually a factor of where they decide to age in place or at home or in some kind of nursing home or assisted living. And a lot of where they decide they end up is because of owning a pet or maybe wanting to own a pet.
Yeah, very quick on that. There's some of the facilities that people might know about in the Meadville area do permit the person to come in with the pet. Some of them let them come in and bring the pet until the pet is no longer living, and then they don't replace that pet. But a lot of them have facilities, but many of them have nothing at all.
Wow.
When you move into a facility, you're going to end up many times having to get rid of that pet. When we're visiting in the various senior facilities, so many people say that they had a pet that they had to leave behind.
Wow.
And that is really an emotional issue for many people.
That is really sad because that pet is usually like a child and it's a big attachment and very emotional. It can cause a lot of, distress for the older adult. So during the program today, we're going to have a few learning objectives. So we're going to look at some research. We're going to look up top considerations for pet ownership. We're going to look at the best pets for an older adult, and Sue's going to go through that. We're going to look at different ways that you could still interact with pets, even if you don't want to own one yourself. And we're going to look at how home care can actually help older adults, live at home safely and take care of their pet safely as well. And then we're also going to dive deep into end-of-life care planning and how we need to consider pets into this one. So with a little bit of research, so we think about older adults a lot, and with COVID brought this to our attention, is this social isolation and loneliness, and pets are actually able to help people preventing that depression among older adults. Studies have shown that depression has been kind of mitigated with someone with a pet or interaction with a pet. And actually, a study in Australia said that 68 nursing home residents said that they were actually less fatigued and less confused and less depressed because pets were in there, like therapy dogs, and we'll get into that later on. So there is, again, a huge connection between health and having a pet or interaction with a pet for older adults. Have you seen that, Sue?
I have. It's so obvious. Of course, we do an awful lot of visiting to the nursing homes, and we have to have all their stories about the pets that they had and why are they not getting a pet now and things like that. But those that have a pet or had a pet, once they say, did you ever have a pet? And they said, yes, I had a black lab. Well, I said, well, how old was the black lab and what color was it and all those kind of things. So it's such a big part of their life, not only when they have the pet, but of course whenever they move into these facilities and can no longer have the pet, that is such a strong part in their memory.
Yes, you're right. Memories are critical, especially older adults in general and people with dementia, to have that really positive interaction and memory with the storytelling around their pet, their family pet, is crucial. And so we've also learned that pet ownership allows older adults to get more exercise. It helps lower blood pressure and lower stress levels because it gets them up and moving and kind of gives them a little bit of a purpose and to keep their autonomy.
I had an interesting thing happen years ago. I was at the cancer center.
Yeah.
And somebody had gone in there to have chemo. So they're sitting there and the nurses are all trying to take the blood pressure, and the blood pressure's honestly almost off the scale.
Yeah.
It's going up so high. And I was there with one of my dogs at the time, and they said, could you bring the dog over for a minute? Took the dog over, and in the meantime, the person has the blood pressure cuff on, petting the dog, petting the dog, petting the dog, and all of a sudden that blood pressure went down.
Wow.
And I see it all the time. People that have a lot of anxiety, especially if it's their first time to the cancer center or they haven't been into a facility for a while, it has an enormous effect on them to be able to have that contact.
You think it's the touch and the fur just relieves that kind of anxiety?
Right, and the petting and just taking their mind off what's going on, and the blood pressure usually gets very possible then for them to get the chemo. So it happens a lot. That's amazing.
And you do that a lot with therapy dogs to come into the hospital, correct?
Right. My particular therapy dog, and people know that I have Maddie right now, she spends every Thursday at the cancer center, and she spends every Friday at Liberty Street.
Wow.
But then in addition to that, I think this week sometime, I think we're going to Westbury. So we go to an awful lot of places where they're interacting. And sometimes it's funny, the nursing person at the facility like at Westbury will say, hey, before you go, could you do me a favor? Could you go up and see so-and-so? She misses her dog tremendously. Could you spend a little bit of time with her? So it's tremendous.
That's very, very impactful for everybody and health related as well.
Right.
I'm sure helps the staff too to kind of calm people down as well as families to know that they're getting the care they need. Exactly, and to calm them down.
Right.
Have you noticed that when a therapy dog will come in to see an older adult that it also calms down maybe the caregiver providing care as well as the families around them?
We were talking about that today. Somebody had said about the nurses. I was at Barco, and someone was saying about how important the dogs are, and I said, but you know what? Look at the stress level of these nurses in here. These are the ones that are giving the chemo to these people. God knows what stage they are in the chemo treatment. And I give them all the credit in the world for being able to do that. And they are always touching the dogs. So when we go to Barco, even to Liberty Street, we have the path that we follow that all the nurses immediately stop what they're doing. And of course, have 1,000 treats for the dog, which doesn't help the dog, but it helps them to make that immediate contact.
That's really incredible. So next we're going to kind of go through considerations for pet ownership. So what do you think are some of the top considerations, Sue, of why an older adult or anyone in general should own a pet?
They're part of your family. You want them. You want them with you all the time. And I think one of the hardest things is to decide when can you have a pet, when is it time to no longer get another pet, or what are the advantages of it for you, and then what dog to get, or a cat. And of course, we always talk about dogs because I do a lot of programs on dogs. But of course, a lot of people would possibly do well with a cat, or bird, maybe fish, anything they can make that contact with. But there are steps that you need to follow if you're going to decide you yourself are going to get a pet at this stage in your life. Or more importantly, sometimes is the family. Trying to say, we want to keep Grandma happy, or Aunt Alice, giving her something to do, but you've got to be real careful about what pet you get and how you make that decision.
Yeah, so again, kind of going off of that with the family, again, you want your loved one to be happy with a pet and feel good about themselves. But again, we have to consider, you know, who is truly going to be taking care of that pet? Is it going to be a caregiver? Is it the family going to have to take on that role? A neighbor? Is someone allergic to a pet? A family member, or the person that's going to be taking care of that person to give them some help and assistance? So I think that is a big consideration that goes into pet ownership. And so when we look at having a pet, are there any new technologies available to help older adults take care of a pet?
Wow, I wish there were so many more. So many times the greatest fear is, so many things happen when the older person gets the pet. If we talk about a dog, I'm sure you have seen this with Home Instead, is we've got the person who maybe gets their meals delivered to them on Meals on Wheels. And it's funny how the meal is always gone and it's a single person, but whenever we look into it more, we find out that the dog or the cat, especially the dog, is getting some of that food.
Yes, we have seen that.
We had that happen with that one.
We did, yeah. So I think they've changed it. So Meals on Wheels are now providing, I want to say, dog food and cat food along with some of the meals that they provided. I think it's
great.
Newer, but in the past we've noticed it was a huge concern with some of our older adults receiving meals from Meals on Wheels or other programs like that because of that attachment that they had with their dog or cat, because it's like a family member to them. They wanted to make sure that they were well fed and healthy, and they would give their food to them before they actually ate themselves. So the meals were not going to the person eating it, but it was instead going to the pet. But I think they've resolved that issue now, but it was pretty frequent for our older adults.
That's a big issue too whenever people have a fixed income.
Yes.
And I've seen that happen too, where a person's on a fixed income and only has a certain amount of money to spend on things.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, especially in consideration with medical concerns or medicines, that a lot of people do this, but many times the older person, where they no longer get their prescriptions filled, or they take half of the prescription instead of the whole amount so they can save some money.
Right.
And they're usually not saving it for themselves. They're saving it to get something, or food, or care of the pet. Wow. So there are all those things, and that's just not, they can't handle it.
Right.
Some of them can, so we depend on home instead. We, as you say, neighbors, family members, anybody that can be around, but there's a lot of isolation with the older person that we get the pet for. And sometimes there isn't that little person sitting on their shoulder saying to them, shouldn't do that, you ought to consider this, maybe this. So the conscience is not working like we'd like it to work. And suddenly, what do we have here? Now we've got an issue.
Right. I think a lot of times people think, oh, a pet, it'll solve everything, but then they forget about the responsibilities and the time and energy and effort and money that goes into sometimes owning that pet.
Absolutely.
Have you seen, are there any kinds of dog breeds or species that are less costly or that you find that are more helpful for an older adult who's looking to have a pet?
Well, let's find out how you're going to make a decision about a pet.
Okay.
Usually the easiest way is if you have a specific pet that you like. Now, I particularly like collies, and people know that. But you can go to the American Kennel Club, and a lot of people don't have that ability to get to that because they might not have a computer. But if they go to the American Kennel Club, you can go there to shelters, and you can many times find a place that just has a certain breed that you like, and you can therefore find a particular breed, if that works. If you go to a shelter, I would say going to a shelter is a wonderful idea, but it's like buying a 747 plane, because they could have so much baggage. You're getting stuck with something that you're not that much aware of. I have a friend of mine, I'm in the process right now of a 15-year-old that I'll be putting down soon, and I'm looking at another dog, and someone said, well, remember, an older person at my age or even older should never get an animal they can't pick up and they can't carry. I obviously can't do that with Maddie or my love of collies, but I do have a small dog, so I'm going to be looking at a smaller dog, because that makes life a lot easier. You can check with your friends, see what your friends have. You can go on to websites such as Pet Finders, but then you find yourself on the website a whole long time going through every conceivable pet on Pet Finders, and they put them in there according to how far they are from your home. So it starts with the ones up here that are 5 miles away because maybe they're at the Humane Society or maybe they're at Anna Shelter or something like that. And the next ones are like 300 or 400 miles. And people think, families think nothing of going that far to get the pet for the dog. Get the pet for the dog. The pet for the dog, the pet for the older person. So you want to consider the exercise level of the dog or the cat or whatever it is. If the person is mobile, and some of our older people are not, then that's a problem, because are you going to walk the dog, or what are you going to do? Now, there's a person I know that lives over in Conneaut Lake, and she can't get out of the house at all. So she has rigged a way that she has a hook right by the door, and it's on a clothesline, and this is all the exercise the dog gets. I think it's a little poodle. And she opens the door, takes the hook, puts it on the dog. The dog goes outside, runs so far on the exercise rope, and then comes back in. So all those things are important, because I don't like to pick up poop in a house, and I don't think an older person's capable sometimes of doing it. So there's so many things like that that you have to look at, and how much maintenance are they going to occur? And we can go back to some of those things, because they're hard to deal with. You know, is it a dog that has to be brushed, or do you have to get it to the groomer, or do you have to get it to get a bath? All those things, and you know what? No one ever thinks of them. But it's not just the older people, because I get people and I say, what in God's name did you get that breed for? And there are people know what the breeds are that I don't particularly care for, and I say, you're looking at the most high maintenance dog on the face of the earth, and you got it and you're 75 years of age. Are you nuts? You don't have the ability to do that.
Right, exactly.
So you really want to look at all those things, not only when we're getting one for somebody or the older person who's making a decision. Again, family, you've got to be in on this.
Yep.
You have got to really take the time to see what Grandma or Aunt Sally wants, and then see how you can get that scope a little bit smaller and try and center in on some possibilities.
Really good point, Sue. So going off of that, so I know we talked about sometimes people just don't pick the right pet regardless of their age. Can you talk a little bit about COVID? So I know a lot of people during COVID bought a pet, and then a lot of people after kind of COVID and they returned back to work, you know, had to get rid of that pet. And I know a lot of people got pets for their parents and other older adults, you know, to try to mitigate that loneliness and social isolation during the pandemic. But what were the repercussions? Have you noticed any?
Well, the one I saw, and I saw it written down, I put the statistics somewhere, the number of dogs, especially dogs or cats, that were rescued during COVID, and then the number that went back to the shelter. Like saying, what was I thinking? What did I do that for? I didn't realize what I was getting into.
Right.
So there's been a big increase in the number of dogs in shelters now, right after the COVID. I think that started to taper off a little bit now.
Right.
But that was really an issue. And a lot of people, again, got the dog because they thought, oh, they go into the shelter and, oh, this dog is so cute. You know what? I think that dog really should take its brother or sister with him. So now we've got 2 instead of 1. And it just goes on and on and on. And there seems to be no happy place.
Right.
But all these things happen whenever you make a decision about a dog or a cat or a pet for yourself or for an older person.
Exactly. So then, again, going off of you were kind of talking about the best pet types and what to consider for an older adult. You talked about maybe smaller being better so they could be able to pick it up or put it on their lap. Would you say older would be better than a puppy because they're calmer, or do you think it'd be better, because I know you talked about if you sometimes adopt, they have a personality already that comes with them, so how would you talk about that?
Older sometimes means you're not going to have them as long.
Right.
Because the average year for a lot of small dogs might be 13, 14 years of age. The bigger dogs, and hopefully they're not getting a bigger dog, might be 7 or 8 years, so that becomes an issue.
Right.
There's just so many things that they just don't consider whenever they're making a decision about getting that pet. The longevity, the care of it, and all those things. What else do you have on there we need to make sure we cover?
Yeah, so I was just going to talk about kind of when we were talking about, you know, it is really great to have a pet. There are a lot of really great health benefits, social benefits, reducing anxiety and stress, helping with blood pressure and different things like that, still allowing independence in your own home, having that, you know, control to be able to care for someone else and the autonomy. But again, pet ownership isn't for everyone, and so there are other ways that we can still interact with pets, but studies have shown that 53% of adults and older adults who had pets when they were younger don't want to have to deal with that responsibility again, because it is a lot, again, of time and money and energy and effort, even though we do absolutely love our pets. And so, although like a lot of people don't want that responsibility again directly themselves, studies have shown that people are happier. 42% surveyed said they're happier when they interact with a pet. And 39% believed that they would be less lonely if they interacted with a pet, and 38% believed that they would be physically healthier, you know, if they were able to see and play with a pet.
Or take them for a walk, too.
Or take them for a walk. So do you have any thoughts about, you know, pet ownership not being for everyone and other kind of solutions that someone who doesn't have a pet could look at?
Well, let's go back and talk about, first of all, whenever you're trying to decide what pet to get. And you've got to decide, first of all, where you're going to find the information. I mentioned before the American Kennel Club. You always have the option of checking with your friends, checking with the neighbors, because everybody's got dogs around. I think there was one time a statistics that I found in Crawford County, this is years ago, there were 24,000 pets in Crawford County. That's a heck of a lot of dogs running around, but people want them, and that's why the pet business is so popular, because it has grown in leaps and bounds with all they offer and where you can get everything now. You want to talk about the exercise level? We talked about that. Is this a dog you're going to be able to walk? Is it one that you're going to have to let out?
Right.
Are you going to, or do you have the type of lifestyle where, what are you going to do with that dog at night? Are you going to kennel the dog? Are you going to crate the dog? These are all things that people don't think about. They go, oh, I didn't know I was going to have to do that. Well, yeah. You can find a lot of information on the computer. You can call, sometimes you can call a shelter, or you can call the local veterinarian and get some statistics from them, or get some ideas from them on what type of a pet you want to get. You want to think about the maintenance of the pet. Is this something that you're going to have groomed? Do you have to have it groomed all the time, or can you brush it yourself? Are you going to have to give it a bath? What if little Danny, the dog, gets out and gets skunked?
Right.
Or something like that happens and you have an emergency. Who's going to help you get the dog to the veterinarian? What veterinarian are you going to go to? Do you have that kind of money to pay for the veterinarian
do you have the
bills?
transportation to be able to get there? Are you able to drive? Yeah, that's
My joke
so true.
always is, someone says something about the money it costs. I say, well, the people know that my veterinarian is Conneaut Lake Vet, and I love them down there, and they're fantastic to my pets. But sometimes at the point when I had 5 dogs, I thought I owned the whole one wing because I was there so often. So like, we're taking an older person, fixed income, maybe just surviving on Social Security or something like that. And now they've got to think, wait a minute, how am I going to pay these veterinarian bills? How am I going to pay just to go in and have the shots, or just all those type of things? So that's really, really tough. And are you so friendly yourself, and are you like to have your door open to people coming in all the time? What if the dog gets out?
Yes.
How are you going to stop the dog from getting out? Is the dog going to bite any of your neighbors and friends that come in? And who's going to train this dog? You can't go to a training school because some come to your home, and I know a few that do, but a lot of times, who's going to train this animal? It's tough.
That's really great points to think about for considering
and you know
to get
what?
an animal.
People don't think about it. But then again, and we've talked about this, Abby, it's bad enough if I don't think about it myself because I'm getting a pet.
Right.
But doggone it, you got to think about the older person that you want to get an animal for. That is so tough to do, and do it right.
Right.
Because if it doesn't work out, who is going to take the dog?
That is
Who's
so
going to
true.
take the cat?
Yeah, who's going to be then responsible for that pet?
Right. And then you got to take the cat either back to the shelter, or the dog back to the shelter.
Or does it fall on the family who got the pet originally?
Right. And who's going to take care of all this? And who's going to make all those decisions? And how in heaven's name are you going to get this taken care of?
And how do you have this conversation then with somebody?
I know, you know this too, because you're on gerontology, but there are conversations that are really, really tough to have with the older person.
Are.
Like, when are we going to move to another place, and you drive in your car and stuff like that.
How do we accept care? How do we take away the keys? Yeah, who's going to care for a pet?
Right, yeah, what are we going to do about a pet?
Yeah.
I mean, even just to have them in the house with them. But on the other side of the coin, and you talked about this and we've mentioned it, that can be the best thing in the world for them.
It can.
To have that pet. Cats are good, and I do like cats, but I want the cat that wants to get on my lap and lets me hold them.
The snuggly cat, the loving cat.
But they don't come with a sign.
Right.
So I might get the one that stays over in the corner and raises its back when anybody comes in and stuff like that. I think you have a better chance maybe with a dog of having the right one. But what's going to happen when people come in the house? Is it going to work out, or is it not going to work out?
Yeah, I was gonna say, because I have a giant German Shepherd, Ranger.
I do.
My grandpa absolutely loved when he came to visit. Just kind of had him for a few hours, and then he went home and he got on to do his own thing at home. And Ranger was absolutely a sweetheart to my grandpa. Would sit on his couch, go in for kisses and pets. But if my grandpa actually owned Ranger, and he would probably not do well with a stranger coming into that home. And so again, it kind of shows you have to pick wisely which pet you bring into the home.
What if I had walked into your house and Ranger was there?
Not good.
I would have probably lost my leg.
Yeah, so again, like picking a pet that will be good with people coming into your homes. And again, if you're a family member and you have your own pet, maybe it's a suggestion, instead of getting a pet for your loved one, maybe just bringing in yours to kind of visit and adopt for just a little while and then hand them back.
What's that called? I have grandbaby.
Yes,
Do you have any dogs?
granddog.
Yeah, I have granddogs. And then they go on to tell me all about that and how important it is. Or dogs come and visit on a regular basis, or whatever. Some of the facilities, going back to the facilities that permit pets, I know there's a dog, right now Juniper's had several, But Juniper, I think right now might have a dog. They've often had cats there. I was up at Rowing Fields.
Yeah.
And they had a cat that they tell me rules the whole place up there. And they have signs on all the on all the doors through the entire facility. Don't let whatever the cat's name is out. It says big signs, do not let, let's say it's Daisy. Don't let Daisy out on every conceivable place.
So it's like the community zone.
It's a community one.
Oh, that's really cute.
But they also I saw some birds up there. A lot of people have birds. So there's a lot of different things. I mean,
a lot of different options.
Right, Abbey and I we're big on dogs, but there's other
people.
things that you consider. I can't think where else. I know Juniper has stuff. I don't know of any. There's no animals though. They're really important whenever we visit at Westbury because we go there so often.
Yeah.
And they love seeing the dogs. And I don't think Cribs has anything. I don't think there's any dogs or cats there.
I don't think so.
Real quick while we're talking about that, what about those mechanical? Some of the facilities, I know that I have seen them at Juniper, and I've seen the one that you have in your window here. You have one with us today, so let's talk about this, what's it called,
robotic pets. So this is a cat here. It has touch points, so when you move it, it'll purr, it moves.
I'll put that on the table.
You can kind of keep it, so you can pet it. And it moves its eyes, it has sensor points, so it'll purr and kind of ease anxiety if it's on someone's lap, feeling like a real cat because it's a real size, it kind of moves like one, it looks like one, and this can really help people in nursing homes, people with Alzheimer's and dementia, and just really any older adult. Also kids love them.
He moves his eyes.
It does, yeah, it's so realistic, and there are a bunch of different
Check
kinds.
the eyes moving. Unbelievable. Are they moving now? I think they are.
You can kind of get, the pressure points. So they've been used, there are a bunch of different kinds. There are different cats, there are different dogs now, and the first robotic animal was actually a seal. And again, this was because no one has negative connotations and thoughts behind a seal because no one has met one, where some people might be afraid of cats and not like them, or some people may be afraid of dogs because of being bit when they were younger, or maybe they're allergic. So again, the first one was a seal, and then other countries then decided to do a cat, because I know Sweden did cats first because it's one of their most loved animals in that area, and so they came up with the robotic cat. And now a lot of nursing homes again, and we use them to help older adults still feel like they have a pet without having to be scared of them, without allergies, without the fear that they might be bit or, scratched or jumped on. So they're really kind of good solution for someone looking to feel like they have a pet when they don't actually have to own one.
He flicks his ears?
He might lay down if you get the right point.
Really?
Yeah, we'll see. You just have to keep petting him.
Can you brush them too? I guess you
can. Yeah, he's looking a little matted,
you can. He's looking like a matted cat.
He might need to go to the vet or a bath. He lifts it and he lays down.
Can people buy these?
You can buy them. This one's about between $100 and $150. You can buy them. They're a little expensive, but it's still cheaper than owning a pet sometimes. And there are dogs, so we can also list. I know there's something called the Tombot. It's a little yellow lab that just came out.
So they could look up online robotic pets.
Robotic pets. Yeah, I don't know.
And you say that we can get them up. To tell you that sometimes they die and don't get back up. Oh, now he's opening his mouth again. There
we go. He might be coming along.
Oh, what a hoot.
So these are our robotic pets.
We popped them back up.
They're they're a really good solution, again, in a nursing home, and someone who doesn't want the upkeep but still feel like they have a pet, and to sit on the lap can really reduce anxiety and stress, and has really had some beneficial health impacts for people.
I've seen a lot of people in the nursing facilities also holding babies.
Yes, babies and kind of pets have become kind of a new solution to help people feel again, bring back their memories, what they had when they were younger, and really just kind of bring some kind of autonomy that they can make decisions and care for someone again.
It doesn't go well if you try and take that from them.
It does not always go well.
No.
There have been some some people have said with robotic animals in a nursing home or even in home care, when we bring them into homes, it can cause sometimes some attachment issues because, you know, it becomes theirs and then they worry if they don't have it with them and what happens. So there are pros and cons, again, just like owning a real pet, I'm a robotic pet as well. And sometimes the stigma around a robotic pet freaks people out because it looks real, but it's not. But I think they're really beneficial, they're really fun, and it really helps an older adult and their families too.
Okay, let's keep going because I could sit and talk to this all day. Oh, we're putting him back on the floor.
You want to keep him up?
Well, I'll put him up here because he is kind of entertaining. Maybe the cameraman will get pictures of him opening and closing his eyes and opening and closing his mouth. Okay, what are some other things?
Perfect. So I wanted to kind of talk about what ways you can encourage an older adult and their families to get involved with animals. So again, if we were talking about maybe they don't want to own one, but what are other ways and solutions that you have found that work?
A lot of people, depending on their age, there he goes again, he's laying down. A lot of people will sometimes work at a shelter. That's kind of hard though, because that could be a little bit more movement than they can handle. Some people, we have therapy dogs, of course, everyone knows that I've got therapy dogs, and we can also take therapy dogs to someone's home and have them interact.
How does someone get involved with doing that if they decided that, again, we use you with our clients who have home instead, but how would someone who didn't know how to get involved contact you if they had a loved one that was interested?
I did a program one time, and it was, I won't say her name, but she was a very well-known person in the community, and she lived up not too far from Westbury, and her, I think it was her granddaughter called me, and I think it was her niece, who called me and said, Sue, my aunt needs to have pet visits, and I say I don't do those. And she says, no, Sue, you don't understand, I really need to have someone come up here. I says, we don't go to people's homes. This is probably about 4 years ago. And I said, and went on and on and on. I said, well, for heaven's name, who is your aunt? And she told me who her aunt was, and I said, okay, I'll do it. I'll try it. And I said, what dog should we take? And she said, well, the dog that belonged to her was a black dog, so could we at least have a black dog go to visit her?
Right, because of that memory and that relationship she had with that animal.
Right, so I went over probably once a month and sat down. She had a box of Milk-Bone biscuits, and she would give the dog biscuits the whole time we were there. She'd sit in her lazy boy chair, love this dog, love the dog more than anything. Just to go on with a real quick story, so she became very, very ill, and she was in the hospital, and she was in intensive care, and they had made the decision that she was near end of life. So the person called me and said, Sue, are you busy? And I said, no, what's up? And she said, can you come down to Meadville Medical Center? My aunt is a patient. She's not doing well. Could you possibly come down and bring the dog with you? The dog's name was Martin. Can you bring Martin with you? And I said, sure. So we go down, go in. He had never been at Liberty Street. He wasn't a dog that visited there then. We went upstairs, went up to her room, and she's definitely not doing very well at all. And he had very short legs, so he was down on the ground. And I said, well, let's lift him up on the bed. So we lifted him up on the bed, and we took her hand and put the hand on Martin, and her hand moved the whole time. And we were there, I bet, 20 minutes.
That gives me the chills.
I know,
oh my gosh.
It was unbelievable if you had been there. And that dog never moved a muscle.
Like he sensed it and knew, and what a very special moment at
Absolutely.
a critical time.
Right, and then at the very, I said, we'd been there about 20, 25 minutes, and I said, well, I think we really should go now. So the family was all there and very appreciative of the dog being in there, but that was a good indication of how much that dog had meant to her
and
for all those years and we had visited there.
And how it fulfilled kind of her wishes and her needs at the time she needed it most. That's incredible what a pet can do, isn't it, in an animal.
It's unreal.
Wow.
And another story, and I think you know this one too, you had a client that and had a caretaker that had a dog, and all of a sudden the client's not doing well at all. So the decision is, what are we going to do with this dog? So my dear friend Wendy Wade at Coney Island Vet calls me and says, Sue, do you want a dog? I said, no, I can't. I've got 2 small ones and a big one. I can't do that. And she said, well, this dog needs a home. I said, well, let me see what I can do. Called around, made the connection, and a friend of mine who had a therapy dog took the dog. The funny part of the story is the dog was built like a little poo-pass. It was so strong, and it was small, and it was heavy. And the problem was the gentleman was feeding the dog constantly, going back to this happens. Caregiver loved the dog so much. And so the connection was made, and the friend of mine who had a therapy dog ended up taking the dog. The gentleman passed away, I think, about 2 days later or something like that. The funny part of the story is that since a friend of mine has had the dog has lost 5 pounds.
Oh my gosh, because of just walking more and eating healthier.
Right, and the dog's not eating constantly,
Right.
somebody giving treats.
Right.
So that's very typical too. But I so encourage people, if you can, come up with the right combination.
Yeah.
Because during the time that the person's living, and if you as a family member can provide for them and make a list or call over
It
here
can have
at
so many
Homestead.
benefits to that person and the family too, coming in to be able to pet the dog and hang out, have something to talk about, something to walk and do while you're there. It is very important if you can have, the right combination of factors and thought it through.
Right, and really think it through. And I know that you've got the information, but you can go online and find an awful lot of this about what you should do whenever making a decision for an older person. If I get a chance now that I'm thinking about this topic and we've talked so much about it, I think I'll probably maybe do something on the Doggy Digest.
Oh, that's a really good,
and cover
that's a good
something on
idea.
that too,
Yeah, the
because
tips,
people really,
tips and
really
considerations.
need to consider that. What else we need to discuss? So we've still, right now, the dog is still living with the person.
Right. So let's talk about kind of planning ahead. I know we just had this conversation, and you thought about planning ahead. So we talk about end of life care. It is a difficult conversation to just kind of start planning and thinking about that. We like to think it won't happen to us. We're not going to die. When in reality we are all going to die. But it is a very uncomfortable conversation to sometimes have, with the stigma around death and dying, and how do you have that with family members. So kind of planning ahead when you're considering if you do have a pet, again at any age, what should go into kind of considering the fact that you do have a pet, but what happens if, say, you get sick or you die or you are no longer able to take care of that pet? What should we know? What should we do?
Being single, I put mine in my will.
You did?
So my will has money set aside for each dog that I have that will be taken care of. And a friend of mine passed away from esophageal cancer years ago, and I had her collie, I think, about 4 years.
Wow.
And the agreement was, and she made that arrangement with me in advance, she said, it was no chance of survival there. And I said, what are you going to do whenever you're no longer living? And she turned to me and she said, will you take this dog? I said, oh my God, I don't want her, but nobody else is going to take her because
so if you don't, who will?
She had some issues. So that's another. And then I was given money by her in her will to suffice to take care of that dog for the years that the dog lived. So that was a big thing. A lot of people make that decision, and they make decisions like that.
Right.
A lot of people have done that. A lot of people get a friend that'll take care of the dog afterwards and all that, and making those arrangements for the care.
Right.
A friend of mine was I think where she lived, near San Antonio, Texas, and there must have been a veterinary school nearby. And the veterinary school had an interesting thing, and I've never seen anyone up here do it, but of course we're not living in a big city like that. But they had, in their veterinary school, they had a policy that if you died and you wanted, you could make arrangements to give money to the veterinary school. They would take your dog or your cat, and it would live there in the housing area that had all the veterinary students.
That's amazing. Okay.
And they would keep that dog living a good life and taking care of that dog until that dog died. I don't know anyone who does that.
That's a really neat policy, though. Then you wouldn't have to worry about that.
Well, in reality, if you take a 10-year-old dog to any of the facilities or the shelters and put them in, it's tough because a lot of times they do not last long at the shelter, either because of loneliness or because maybe aggression or because nobody wants them.
Right, that's really sad.
So now you've got the situation where Grandma or Aunt Alice liked the dog so well, and the dog suddenly has been taken to a shelter. It's not going to make it.
That's really tough.
So that is really, really tough to do.
Yeah. So how did you think to put your dogs in your will then? Just because you...
I had heard about people doing that, and someone had done it with me.
Yeah.
And so after, whenever I got to the point that I was working on those arrangements, and I made the arrangements to have someone take care of my dogs. Of course, I have people that say to me, whenever you're no longer living, I want this dog, I want that dog. Yeah, you'll take Maddie, I'm sure. Everybody wants Maddie. So I decided I couldn't make that decision, so I decided to give my dogs to the person who's the executor of my will. and leave it up to that person
what to do.
decide who's going to take care of the
Was
dogs.
it a difficult decision? Was it emotional during that time to figure that out, or no, because you're just planning?
Well, I was planning, and
Okay.
you have to make that plan. You have to do that.
Because it wasn't like you had to figure out right away. You were able to kind of think it through because it's sort of been early on. You were proactive with it.
Yeah, and if you, we know, of course, people die very, very quickly, and suddenly there's the family.
Right.
And of course, the one that the dog that we did with the therapy dog person and stuff like that all worked out pretty well. But you got lots of options out there. You just have to use them.
Right.
Don't get caught in a situation where you haven't done anything about this, and not you as the owner who's wanting to, as an older person wanting to get a dog, but you as the family. Darn, that family sometimes it doesn't even know what Aunt Alice does with the dog.
Or what the dog's needs are, what the care plan is for the dog. Right.
You know, I also
who
saw
the vet is for the dog, even.
Funny you'd say that, because at one point I was thinking about that, and I actually made a list of something I wanted to do about all the things that you've got to make sure that are on paper as to the care of the pet when the pet is
That is so true. You do that, you know, with a person and a child and things like that,
said.
but I think we sometimes forget to do that for our dog, what they can eat, what they can't eat, just different behaviors.
Some of us would be writing a book.
We would be, right?
I had somebody who used to come to my house to take care of my dogs, and he was a worker on the property, and I had like 4 pages. When you go to bed, these are the blinds that you close. You leave this light on. Then in the morning
you leave the TV on.
Oh, the TV's on all the time, but the TV's not on, the radio's on. They're all those crazy...
Or how do you take the medication for the dog? Do you put it in a bunch of different food, or he won't eat it? That's my dog, picky. Only put it in like chicken salad.
Oh.
Yeah. So you're right, all of the kind of rules and
they're
regulations.
crazy, but they're so important.
They
are. Let's go back to what Homestead. Homestead, you do have caretakers that will take care of dogs?
We do, yeah. So here at Homestead, again, we go into the homes of older adults to help them age in place and receive quality care in their own homes. And so we do things with helping with activities of daily living, like eating, cooking, you know, helping them get to the bathroom, personal care, things like that. We can take people to doctor's appointments, but our care professionals, we call them care pros, they're also able to help assist with pets. So if someone has a cat or a dog or a bird, we can help feed them, take them on walks, make sure their litter boxes changed and then clean. We can take them to the vet appointments too. So we can do...
Or grooming.
Or grooming. Lots of different things to make sure that our client, so the older adult, is being cared for and receiving proper care, as well as that animal too. So it really helps both parties to make sure everything's going well and everybody's getting their needs met and fed and other things like that.
Well, the one we know about, and we've shared the story on, is the person who had trouble with the loss of the person that they were taking care of, but had a tremendous problem with the loss of the pet in their life now.
Yes, so yeah, you're right. A lot of times our care pros go into a home and, you know, befriend, you know, their client that they're taking care of, but they also then kind of form that loving attachment with that pet there. It almost becomes like their own pet themselves, and really they benefit from that interaction with that animal as well. Just like our older adults do, so do our caregivers and their families, just because now there is someone, a pet in there to really help, be kind of like a therapy dog there that they can play with and interact with, and it's really a positive experience for everybody.
Okay, what else do we need to make sure these people know? We really have to scream and yell at these family members, because it's you've got to make these arrangements. When something happens, suddenly you've got the dog that belonged to Aunt so-and-so or grandma, and now what are you going to do?
So I guess for us, before we go into kind of some additional resources that they can look at, families and older adults, any main key tips and takeaways, so for the older adult and the family when considering, let's say, pet ownership, and as well as what to do later on? What would you say are the big takeaways of, like, maybe 3 key points that someone should know?
Make the decision about what pet you're going to get carefully, and spend a little bit of time on it.
So do some of your own research and asking around.
Yes. The perfect example, just in general, is I'll have somebody that'll have a dog, and the dog is living in an apartment on the 3rd floor in Meadville, and it's an Australian Shepherd.
Who needs activity, but maybe the person can't get them down the
I
steps
know,
because they can't move well with their mobility.
What are you thinking?
Right.
You want to get the little Chihuahua or the little Pomeranian or the little Shih Tzu that wants you to hold the dog forever. And there are good breeds like that. The Shih Tzus, the Pomeranians,
Is those ones you would recommend? Those?
Oh, Chihuahuas are a little tough. But yeah, all the smaller ones. You want to get a dog that might be 10, 12 pounds. That's usually pretty easy for a person to lift.
Right.
Because, as I said, someone said, never get a dog you can't lift. You can't lift them. What do you do?
Right.
I mean, if something were to happen to me, I can't lift Maddie into. Maddie jumps in the car herself.
You need care to help you help the dog.
Yeah, that's a good point. Care to help me to help the dog. True. But the size of the dog is such a huge thing. So be careful about that and the disposition of the dog, and check that out. What else do we want to think about?
I would just say make sure that there is a plan to make sure that you can take care of that pet. So again, bring someone in that you have family that you know is going to be able to care for the pet. Hire someone like Home Instead and their caregivers who can help you take care of that pet. And again, neighbors, be cognizant if there are neighbors that can help out, but maybe the neighbors are allergic or afraid of dogs, and if people are coming into the home, make sure that they're going to be okay with strangers coming in and things like that.
The neighbors might be able to tell you that, my God, I haven't seen that dog outside for the last 2 days.
You're right, the neighbors.
Well, that's a good sign that something's not going right with the dog.
You're right. If they're not seeing the usual routine of the dog.
And they can't take care of the dog. And now, once it starts to escalate, then it goes so very, very quickly.
Right.
It goes down, and then you've got all kind of problems. What else do you want to look at?
I guess the last point, which I think is really important that you talked about too with your own life, is kind of planning what to do if something happens to you and you need to care, who cares for that dog, making sure that you plan ahead for that, just like we all should think about, but what happens to that pet.
And of course, unfortunately, there comes the if you get a dog that's too old, then maybe the older person who is so attached to that dog or cat loves it more than life, and now that pet dies. Yes. And now you've got to worry about them dealing with the loss, and the loss is terrible.
And loss of the pet. Again, it's like a family member. It's like their own child almost, their friend, their buddy. Again, how do we deal with an older person who does lose a pet, and that takes a big toll on their mental stage, which usually a pet kind of helps with. But what happens with that grief and loss? So having conversations around that to make sure they're receiving the support and help they need after an animal passes away. To make sure that they are healthy and feel safe. And do you get a new pet after that, or do you kind of implement new strategies, maybe with a therapy dog coming in to kind of help with that loss a little bit?
It's terrible. The pet business has just grown tremendously, as we know. I love all the ads on television now with pets, and if Grandma or Aunt Alice, whoever it is, watches television, they see the pets constantly, especially the ones with Toyota, which is the golden retriever with, they've got the best ads going.
They do.
But they have those, and there's always one, and the best one, I just saw it recently, and it was one, I got to think who it was. But there's all the family members are sitting around, and there's a cat. And the attorney is reading the will. And the will goes through and says, and the person gets maybe a flower that's in the house and all that. And every conceivable thing that the person had was for the cat.
Wow, yeah, that's really funny.
It's for the cat. And then the last one was they were going to make sure the cat had, or Bark Box or one of them, was going to have care from Chewy the rest of the dogs, their cat's life.
Oh, that's really funny.
But it's so funny, and that's all we want to think about.
Right.
When someone gets old, and you're moving them to a facility especially, you know that their concern is going to be, what are we going to do about the dog?
That's so true. They're so attached, as they should be. It's their person, their pet in that capacity and regard. But yeah, what do we do with decisions like that if someone does move into some kind of assisted living or nursing home community, and they don't allow pets, having that conversation of who will take the pet, will they still be able to see that pet, and what you can do then to help relieve that stress and anxiety.
The local shelters can help quite a bit. I'm a very strong believer in Because You Care.
Yeah.
And I love Anna's shelter, but they've got so much happening with them anyways.
Can you talk a little bit about Because You Care?
I'm a very strong believer in Because You Care, and there's some other places that do the same thing, but let's use them as an example.
Okay.
They only have, I think, 10 kennels on site.
Wow.
So they might have 30 dogs available, but the other 20 are living in foster homes.
Oh, wow, okay.
Which is a great situation. You want to check this even before you get a dog from a shelter, is you want to make sure that you're dealing with a place where puts them in foster homes and doesn't keep them in cages all the time. So whenever you get that dog from Because You Care or someplace like that, you might be getting notes and notes and notes of what that dog does or doesn't do. So you're just not walking out with a dog that
no
that dog is so cute.
on, right?
Yeah, I think I
so
want that
instead of
dog.
just looking at, oh, they're cute, I want
Right.
one, like do your research on that. Just because they're cute doesn't mean they're the right fit for you.
Right. As I said, I'm a strong believer in Because You Care. I like Straight Haven in Greenville.
Yeah.
There are some great shelters
really
out there.
great, yeah.
And I was looking at some today. I was looking at one in Ohio, and I thought, no, wait a minute. This was outside of Columbus, and I thought, am I really going to drive to Columbus to get a dog? Because I'm looking for a small dog at some
Oh,
point.
what kind are you looking for, Sue?
One that I can lift.
I love it. So you're using these kind of tools and tips that we discussed today.
Right, I have to because I'm going to have to get one too. And my problem is I have another dog at home.
Right. So compatibility.
Yeah, and and then when the dogs are fighting, if you're an older person,
Right.
how are you going to get them apart?
Right. That's so true. Again, you got to do your research.
Yeah, I've got to tell another quick story that once happened. Once I was the owner of the Bark Park at one point, and we had training classes going on. A man walks in, had to be 72, 75 years of age, had never owned a pet, and I won't tell you where he got it, but it was a local
This
situation.
was his first pet then?
Walked in with a pit bull, a black lab mix. I could have told you from 50 feet away it was a black lab mixed with a pit. The man had never ever owned a dog,
pet, let
and
alone
now
a pit
he's
bull
got a pit.
lab.
And they didn't care at the shelter. All they cared about was getting that dog out the door and giving it to someone. So you've got to be very careful whenever you, as an older person, or when even for grandma or your aunt, make sure that you get a lot of information on that pet before you give it to them.
Yeah, so do your research.
Yes, what else? Anything else? Any additional resources here you can
I
think
think
of?
those are the main ones we talked about, shelters, Humane Society, again, utilizing therapy dogs in your program. Pause hand delivered, just because it allows you to still be able to experience having a pet and petting something and having that warm fuzzy feeling when you get to interact with pets and dogs without that responsibility and that toll that it'll take with time and money and other things like that.
A lot of people always say fostering a dog. I could never do a foster dog because once they're in my house, they're not leaving.
Because the attachment.
Right, the attachment, I couldn't do it. So I love the people that will foster pets, but it's not me.
Because that's always an option, but again, I don't think I could do it either because I wouldn't want to give it up.
No, that's true. So anything else we need to add? Is there anything else we've forgotten here?
This is like the main takeaways again of, older adults and pets and what to think about and considerations before getting one. And then again, other options if you don't want to own one yourself, but you still want to interact with one.
Right, and certainly make sure you pick the right pet.
Yes.
For your grandmother or for your aunt. Abby, thanks so much. I appreciate you coming in and discussing this. It was great. And if anybody has any questions, they can contact you. Or, again, Home Instead does provide that service. And I would think possibly some of the other services in the Meadville, Crawford County area will also help you out.
Agreed, yep.
If you have an older person who's presently getting services from any of the other ones.
Yep, any other home care agencies should have that to be able to provide as well, correct.
And check and make sure you say, you know what? Aunt so-and-so is going to want a pet. Are you going to stick around when we make that decision?
I love it.
Good thing.
Thank you so much for having me, Sue.
Thank you.